Welcome. Today we'll be going over Microsoft PowerShell version 5. My name is Zeke Burton and I'm currently taking CIS5320 Operating Systems at the Florida Institute of Technology, where I'm currently pursuing my master's in Computer Information Systems. Today we'll be going over what is PowerShell, how we work with PowerShell, and the three bases of PowerShell version 5. Which happen to be commands, or in the PowerShell lingo, commandlets, scripts, which are the .ps1 files, and then objects. What is PowerShell version 5? PowerShell version 5 is a Microsoft scripting language that used to be only for the Microsoft operating system. As of August 2016, this is now an open source and cross-platform scripting framework so that our Macintosh and Linux operating system users can now install this on their operating systems. Microsoft PowerShell version 5 is an automation and configuration management framework. This framework can be used both local and remote, and is a scripting language used by system admins. This is very good for system admins to know because of the idea it can be used both local and remote. So we see PowerShell as an automation configuration management framework. System admins a lot of times are having to perform tasks on the systems that they are admins over. If these systems are linked together, and a system admin can be on one PowerShell terminal and work with multiple computers that are networked together. This is really good, especially in the defense organization where a lot of things have to be kept nice and tidy. This system admin could work with those computers and not have to go to each computer. PowerShell version 5 is built off of the .NET framework. So for our developer friends that are watching, a lot of this might look like object-oriented programming, and which good deed it is, because our common languages C#, Java, and Python are all object-oriented based programming languages as well. So if you understand object-orientedness, then PowerShell scripting might come of ease to you. In this video, how will we be working with PowerShell? Well, there's two options. In a Windows operating system environment, Windows PowerShell is an application that is there. For our Macintosh users, once you install PowerShell, you can get to PowerShell through terminal. This is a command line interface that's very difficult to use unless you're 100% master of PowerShell. For the purposes of this video, we'll be using Windows PowerShell ISE. For a developer that is new to PowerShell, this is kind of the IDE for PowerShell. This has several different sections within it that might help you when you're developing your PowerShell scripts. One section is obviously where you type your scripts in. To the right is where you can get some help on commands and kind of have a dialogue look to fill out our commands and build your commands with point, click, and paste. And in the bottom portion of it is actually the simple PowerShell window, and this is where we can look and see how our scripts and our commands are functioning. For the realm of this video, we will be using the Windows PowerShell ISE to explain to you how it can be used and how it can work to your advantage. Our next section will be going over the commands or the commandlets there in PowerShell. Before we start going over the commands and commandlets of PowerShell, I wanted to give a brief overview of the Windows PowerShell ISE. So we can see here, as I mentioned before, up here is where we can start doing our scripts. To the right over here, we can see that we can search for commands. When I click on that, I can see the arguments that can be given, and can simply type something in. I can copy, I come over here and I can paste, and it'll type out the command for me. Or if I wanted to, now this wouldn't work, let me remove this right here, and I can come over here, click run, and you see that it'll automatically, if we scroll back up to understand what it's done here, we can see that it inputted that get command into the PowerShell window, and this is the result of that command, which shows us all the commandlets that we can run here in PowerShell. Now this is a brief overview. Another thing that I wanted to show real fast is that there's shortcut keys. So we can see that run is F5, and so if I open a PowerShell script and I hit F5, I can see that it runs down here. Now in PowerShell and not the ISE, we would have to go and type our path to get us to the PS1 file that we mentioned in the introduction. Simply hitting F5, which you can see here now, is available to use. We can run that script without having to do a lot of manual typing here in the PowerShell window. Now this is just a brief introduction to the ISE. Now that we get into the command portion of the video, before we start learning commands, we need to understand how they're constructed. Commandlets in PowerShell version 5 are constructed with a verb-noun format. The three examples that we see here are the verb get command. We will discuss this in a few minutes about what this command does. Get help. Set location. All commandlets in PowerShell version 5 are formatted in the verb-noun format. Now let's understand 5 simple commandlets in PowerShell version 5. The commandlets that we're going to be looking at is get command, get help, write host, get children, and move item. We'll briefly go over and understand what they do, and then we'll see examples of them within the PowerShell ISE. Get command, as used before when we were talking about the ISE, lists all commands that are available to use within the PowerShell dialog. Get help is something that you can use in the PowerShell dialog that shows you the parameters and how to use a certain command and what to expect as a result of that command. Write host is used to display something to the screen, whether it be a variable that we don't know exactly the value of it at compile time, or simply a string to the user. Get child item is used very often in the scripts that I wrote. Get child item is used to get the items that belong to a specific item. If we're talking about a specific folder, the get child item will get all of the files that are in that folder. If we're talking about a folder in the registry, this will get all the keys that are under that registry folder. The last command that we'll be looking in is the move item. For a operating system outside of PowerShell, this might be kind of like a copy and paste. This is used to move an item and all of its dependencies to a new location. Now, let's go over to the ISE and understand how and what we have to do to get these commands to work. Now that we've gone over these commands in the PowerPoint, let's look at them in the ISE and see how they're used. The first one, get command. Down here in the PowerShell window, I can simply type get command, and as seen before, this will list all the commandlets within the PowerShell jurisdiction. We can see that they follow the verb-noun relationship as discussed before, and there's a very diverse list of these commandlets that can be used within PowerShell scripts and other PowerShell interaction. Our next command, get help. So say I type in get help get command. This will tell us in the PowerShell window about the get command commandlet. If you're not in the ISE and don't have the help over here on the right, can be used. This is very helpful because we can see the kind of arguments and things that we can send along with everything else talking about the command that we've chosen. If we just type in get help, we can see that there's ways of getting help, and there's way to update these help. This help is can be updated, and there's a ways to update your help so that you have the most accurate description and everything you need when you go to use the get help. Now if we're looking at our third command, write host. So if we come over here on the right, and we're going to type in write host, and we can see the different things we can do. If I want to type in hello world, I can click run. Again, remember that it puts the command over here in the correct format, and we see that it executes hello world and displays that to the user. But if you're working with a script, we can come up here and simply use our variable over here in the dialog as well. So I can put the $sign to define that it's a variable, and we're going to put str string because we already have that equal to hello world over here. We can then hit insert, and it can put it over here, but we don't want that. We want to copy, and we will come over here and paste it. Now that we've pasted it, we can save and hit F5 or run to run that and see that it executes the hello world. So the right over here on the right is very, very helpful when working with your commands and different ways it can be used. Now our next command is get child item. So get child, if I could spell correctly, get child item. We can bring up and look at the details of what we want to over here. So if we list here, we see that we have some folders, some PS1 files, and a couple of zip files. If we type in get child item, it lists everything. Or over here we want to filter star.txt. If we copy this or insert and run it, we can see that it only gets the .txt files. We can use that, and we could have typed that manually, but over here we can see that we can do that. If we run our get help on this command, we could see that we also could. So we're going to type in get help get child item, and we see that over here, if we read through here, we can see that we can do the filter. This can be used in many different ways, but a quick example, here's the filter. The quick example is right here. So not going to explain this because we'll go into detail later, but if I want to get a files, I want to run a for each for every file in a list. I'm going to get, and I only want the text files, I can get a variable called files and use the get child item, send it the path that I want to send it to, and I can say, hey, I only want to get the .txt files, which we can see would return this list if that command was ran at this location. This is a get child item, and with scripting it's very, very useful to get the child items of the parents. Our next example will be move item. So if we type in move item, we can see that I can give a path to move that item. If I open up another script, there's a lot of things that we can do to files. So if I want to move an item, I can say, give it that path and say I want to move test.txt, and I want to send it to, I'm going to copy that, and the destination is going to be new folder. If I open up, I can see that test.txt is right here, and I have a new folder, and let's delete that file. That doesn't have a test.txt file in it. If I run this correctly, we have to give it The problem is that there's a space here. So we have to give it in quotes. This is a good example to show that the erroring there in PowerShell. So if I run this, we see that nothing happened. But if I go over, I can now see that test.txt is in the folder. These are 5 simple commands that can be used to show the commands within PowerShell. Like I said, there's a ton of other commands to be used if we look at git command, but these are 5 simple commands that will help you in the PowerShell version 5. Now that we're looking at scripts in PowerShell, this is the second of the 3 basic things in PowerShell. Scripts, just like another scripting language, is how system admins take full advantage of scripts within PowerShell. One thing, and one major thing that we need to note here, is how PowerShell handles security dealing with scripts. It's all about execution policy. There's 2 commandlets that we need to look at here. One, of course, we can refer back to is the verb noun, how a commandlet's set up. One is called set execution policy, and the other one's called get execution policy. As we can see here displayed on the screen, there's 4 different ways that PowerShell can be set dealing with scripts. The first and harshest way that PowerShell deals with scripts is being restricted. This means no script can be run. PowerShell can be used only in interactive mode. The next one is all sign, which means only scripts signed by a trusted publisher can be run. The next one is remote sign, which means downloaded scripts must be signed by a trusted publisher before they can be run. And in the way that kind of opens up the gate and there's no restrictions at all is with unrestricted. There's no restrictions and all PowerShell scripts can be run. But let's take a second to understand scripts in PowerShell. PowerShell deals with access to the COM and WMI objects. The COM is the component object model, and the WMI is Windows management instrumentation. With this being said, scripts in PowerShell can be very dangerous. Understand a script before you run it on your computer. With access to these objects, there's no limit to what a script can do to your computer, and very easily could mess up your computer if left to a malicious script. I don't advise to have unrestricted set on execution policy, because it means that you can get a script from anywhere, and if it gets run on your computer, there's no idea what happens. It doesn't matter what level you have, you at least have to have all sign, remote sign, or unrestricted to run a script. But no matter how strict you are with your execution policy, please understand a script before you run it on your computer. Now that we have that out of the way, we can jump over to the ISE and look at some scripts and understand them and how they can be ran. Now that we're over in the ISE, we can look at the execution policy and how we can get that and set that to the correct level of security that we want. If we come over here and search get execution policy, we click that and run it, we can see that I have mine set to remote sign. Remember, you have to set it to the bottom 3 of our PowerPoint to let any scripts be ran in PowerShell. How this can be set is if we go look at the set execution policy, we see that we have to pick a execution policy to set it with. The ISE doesn't give us options, but we know from the PowerPoint that one option is remote sign. This is the current level that mine is. So you could simply copy this and paste it, but it says, hey, the execution policy helps protect you from scripts that you do not trust. Changing the execution policy might expose you to the security risks described in about execution policies help. This is basically explaining, hey, these restrictions are set for a reason. to change the execution policy, you have to start, you have to start PowerShell or the ISC as administrator. So we won't do that just for the sake of time, but it has to be ran as administrator because it messes with a registry key that really only an admin should have. This is a very important thing, and please make sure you have your security set up well and you understand a script before you run it on your computer. So now that we have looked at the get execution policy and set execution policy, let's look at running a script. We see here that if we go up, we can, this is back when we moved our path. But what we can do is we'll look at the get largest file and run F5. What this does is to run a script, you have to go and run the PS1 file. Remember that PS1 is a type script file, and if we go and look at our scripts and the type in Windows, it tells us that it correlates that PS1 to a Windows PowerShell script file. So you have to run the PS1 to run the script. But let's understand this one simple script, and we can understand how we can use commandlets and logic along with variables to get something very interesting. This function, or this script, starts with a function called get largest file. It accepts a p parameter. We can see that by the $, and it casts it as a string. So inside the function, we set two variables. We create two variables, one file name and one as an integer. We cast it as an int. Next thing we do is we create a files variable. We use a commandlet. So let's see what this commandlet does. We're going to type in get help get child item and see that this is used to get a child. These are the parameters that we can give it and some aliases. Aliases are things that you can also run that gets, we see that ls is more of a command prompt, but there's things that it's the same. So we're going to get child item and we're going to send it p. At compile time right now, we have no idea what p is because this function can be called with anything. So as long as there's a path, it gets every file that's in that path. So then we look at the for each loop. We take and get every file that contains in this file. So this path had 5 files in it. For every file, we're going to see, now this is an object. We'll talk about that in a minute, but a file has a length, and that's how big the file is. We cast that to an int, and then we see is it greater than -gt is greater than file size. File size is our local variable here. So the first file will always be, not always, a good chance it's larger than 0. So for every file, the first file, this good chance is going to be true. So what it does is look at the file object. We get a name from the file, and we set that to file name, and we get the length, and we set it to our 2 common variables. These variables will store the largest file length and the largest file name in our variables. We loop through that, and this logic will say, hey, whatever is stored in these guys will be our biggest file. So we can take and simply output to the user the variable name. So outside the function, we see that we can create a local variable, call it, give it a path, and send it to the get largest file path. So if we go look at that folder, we see that the largest file in here, if we scoot over and we look at these PowerShell scripts compared to a Word document, is easily this Word document. This is a zip file. It's pretty large, but it's not as large as this document. So we'll see that a Word document called assignment 3 will be the largest file in here. So what we can do is we could manually type out the path to this PS1 file, but the great thing in the ISC, as we covered before, is that you can simply hit F5 and it'll put whatever script you're looking at up here down here and run that. We can change this and get the smallest file by putting an LT here. So now when we hit F5, it'll save this script and run it. So it says the script you're about to run will be saved. In the future, do not show me this message, because if I'm running it, I want to save it. It doesn't output anything. So we go over here and see that there is things in here that have no size. So that's a bad example, but we can see that if it's greater than, it will give us the largest file in this folder. Now this is just a brief example of a script and how it can be run in PowerShell. Please remember to understand a script before you run it. I wrote this script so I understand it, but if you get a script from online, understand it before you run it, because with the access to the COM and WMI objects, there can be some malicious things that happen from a script. So again, please make sure you understand the execution policy that you select before you run a script, and understand the logic and what a script is doing before you run it. Next, we'll be looking at the objects and PowerShell version 5. So when we're dealing with objects, which is the third and final piece of this presentation, we're going to jump in straight into the ISE. As we remember it from before, PowerShell version 5 is object-oriented language, scripting language. If you don't understand object-orientedness, please refer to somewhere else to understand that. The idea of an object is creating a type and then creating an object of that type. The simple example that with some help of the scripting guide online is the car example. So if I'm going to make a car, well, technically truck, so let's use a truck. So it's type truck. So what we're going to do is creating a simple class called a truck. Every truck has a VIN, has a number of wheels, at least has, in this case, it's a number of wheels is 4. Some trucks are 2 doors and 4 doors, so we're just going to leave that as a non-default value. They have a year, so the year your truck was made, or the date your truck was made, and then they have a model. So it could be what kind of truck. So, and then all trucks have a horn. So there's a simple method called sound horn. Thanks for the scripting guide online. So the idea is that we have this static, we have this class called truck, but really what we can do is there's Chevy trucks, there's Dodge trucks, there's Ford trucks, there's Toyota trucks. So we're going to create an object of type truck, or create it for a Ford truck. So we created a $Ford variable, which is a new object of truck. So a Ford has now inherited all these properties and one method. Every object that's created of type truck inherits these. But what they can do is pertaining to a Ford. So if I wrote down here $Dodge equals new object truck, now we can say Dodge dot model equals Ram, Dodge Ram. So even though they're both types of truck, they're two different trucks. So that's the idea of creating object-orientedness. Have a class that you can create, but have different objects that have their own values for them. So let me delete this quick little example. But what we can see here is we set the VIN, we set the number of doors. So we have a 4-door truck that has a VIN of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Please don't steal my truck. We have a Ford. We set the year. We set it so that truck was made today, and we set the model for F-150 to have an F-150 truck. Now what we can do is we can do Ford.SoundHorn. So what it does is go in here and, again, with the help of the scripting guy online for PowerShell, a great resource for online help, we can get this code which will make your computer make a beep. So let's see what, and then also we're just going to output this variable and see what it does. So again, if you run F5, you can hear the beep, and it gives you the values of that. So why did we do this and not write host? So we do write host $forward, then we run that. It just says truck because a Ford is a type truck. But if we simply just output the variable, we can see that the properties of it are set. This is a fun little example, but looking at our example of get largest file, you can remember that we use file length, file name, and these are ways of using objects from the operating system. So every file has a name, every file has a length, and there's several other properties that a file has, a type file, which we get from a list of files which come from the get child item from our path. Object orientedness is the way of the future. A lot of the modern languages are using this. If you don't understand object orientedness, there's several good, well-sounded places online to learn about it, and definitely try to learn it because it'll help you in your programming and in your future. In conclusion, we see that PowerShell version 5 uses a .NET framework. We see that commandlets are the heart and soul of everything in PowerShell and are the true workhorses of everything that gets done within PowerShell. We see that commandlets are set up in the verb noun format to understand what they will be doing and to make them easier to remember for us. Scripts are a way to save off and use commandlets together in functions or just simple scripts for an admin. The execution policy determines if you can run a script and what kind of security it uses when looking at a script. Remember to know what a script will do before you run it because they can be dangerous for your computer system. And remember that PowerShell is an object-oriented scripting language. You must have a firm knowledge of object-orientedness and how to deal with objects to be successful in PowerShell. Thank you for taking a chance to look at this, and hopefully this has taught you a little bit about PowerShell version 5. You can do simple Google searches to learn more on PowerShell, and definitely something that a system admin that should look into if they're administrating at least Windows computers, but remember that it's cross oriented, so you can go to Mac and Linux as well. Thank you and have a good time.